And so the question I always start with is what movies or shows inspired and shaped you growing up?
So growing up, I watched a lot of old Hollywood movies. My dad is he's very passionate about old Hollywood. Growing up in India, he would just go to the theaters to try to watch Lawrence of Arabia, Citizen Kane, all these larger than life type characters. So he really raised us on a lot of old, both Hindi movies as well as Hollywood movies. But for me, the movie that really spoke to me as a kid was Lord of the Rings. I I think it was, I must have been 11 or 12 when saw the first movie, and I just couldn't believe it. I could not believe I had never before experienced being moved by a story and then being moved by music like that. That was my first experience of really good music. And for weeks and weeks after, I was just listening to the songs over and over. But I think just the concept of having such characters oriented to where it's doing good, right? Like trying to defeat evil, and no matter how difficult it is, and having that moral center, it really inspired me.
So were you more into the big blockbusters as a kid?
Um, I think a little bit. I think for me, it became more about books. Once I read Harry Potter, it became more and more about the books. And so even then I went back and read Lord of the Rings. I think I was not necessarily oriented towards blockbusters. I just liked a really good story, that it should tell a tale that at the end of the day, it has a good moral and shows that fight of good versus evil, whether it's playing out between characters or playing out within characters. I think that's what always drew me in, because there are those types of movies that are very, let's say, art housey. They're very, or they don't necessarily have a positive tone. They're more actually maybe telling kind of a negative story. And artistically, I can admire it and appreciate it, but it doesn't touch me in the same way, especially if I'm, as I've grown older, the movies that really speak to me are movies like Interstellar or Inception. And then every time I'm watching Interstellar, I feel like I'm in the movie, and I'm feeling all the full depth of emotion of it. And I always warn everyone around me, like, I'm gonna cry. It's okay. Lean into it. It's not a big deal. Because that's what I like when I'm watching a movie. I want to feel.
Yeah, for sure. And so what inspired you to start talking about films and start your YouTube channel?
I think what shocked me, because Hollywood is this incredible, has been this mammoth of just churning out beautiful stories, beautiful movies, really pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And then it has taken such a sideways turn of being, it's so clearly corrupted. You could call it a disease, you could call it, however you want to, visualize it, but it has gone so sideways and it has become pathological. And that's what really shocked me, because speaking of blockbusters, I really enjoyed the first three phases of Marvel. I did not know who Iron Man was. Literally, I had no idea who that was. And I'd never grown up with any comic books. I've never picked up a comic book since. So my entire experience of it was in going to the theaters for the first time. And it was such an incredible story. But then you see it suddenly degenerate, because you have this excitement, because, this feeling of like, let it last forever. Hopefully this keeps going, right? They continue to ride that high if they could manage it for 11 years, which is incredible. But seeing that degeneration play out really intensely, that really shocked me. And I said, well, we have to understand why. And I think my approach to it is always, whenever I hear a response on like why, I try to figure out whether it's a complete answer or if it's a very one-sided answer. Because to say something like, oh, it's because people are stupid, or some flippant answer is never sufficient, right? To really understand why, you have to dive into aspects where there could be legitimate reasons why this is happening, but that might also mean that the output is not good. Like there can be this balanced view on things. So that's what I really wanted to start to talk about, because it was very easy for people to dismiss any criticism as, oh, you're toxic in this way, or whatever ism they wanted to attach to the critic. But I wanted to criticize it in a way that was legitimate, where no, I want to really call out the problem with this, where you can't just write me off as a racist or a sexist or however, or bigoted. I want a proper conversation about what you guys are trying to do with this shift.
And do you think they know what they're trying to do with it?
Okay, so speaking of Interstellar, there's a line in that I really, really like, which it's Coop's father-in-law says to him, and I'm guessing you're familiar with
Yeah.
with the movie. Yeah. Coop's father-in-law says to him, it's fine that you want to go out of space, but it's the why of it. That's what really matters, right? That the action doesn't have as much morality attached to it as the why behind something. But I think most people, when they're acting out, don't realize why they're doing something. And I think that's just true for everyone, right? There'll be so many times where I'll lash out at someone or I'll be upset in a fight or something, but I'm not sure why. And I think it takes discussion to really elicit that, because we're not as good about thinking internally as we are about thinking externally and talking our feelings out. So that's why the answer comes slowly. So I would say that they think that they know why they're doing this. And I think they think because it's like, oh, this is the right thing to do, right? And they're attached to these very buzzword kind of approaches, like this is for diversity, this is for representation, this is for progress, and then they feel this attachment of true morality associated with that. But is that really why you're doing that, right? Because those can be good things, there's nothing wrong with that, but are you doing something for the positive movement for women, or are you doing it because you want to punish men? And that discussion doesn't really happen, but you can feel it. You can feel that they're actually angry. And that's, we were talking about the video that came out today on my channel, but that's the crux of my discussion, is that what is driving this activism of Hollywood? And there's this emotion, this underlying emotion, which is resentment. They're angry. And that is the problem. And I think for the last 30, 40 years before all this madness started, Hollywood was moving with a positive emotion. We had a ton of amazing female characters, and none of them were out to punish men. It was not punishing oriented. And because it came from a place of positive excitement of telling new stories with new types of characters, it was a very positive emotion attached to it. But today we're in such a divisive place that it's easy to take on the content, all the emotion of resentment, and think that that's okay.
When do you think this started too? Because for me, like, I never really noticed too much of like a propagated message and too many like lectures in films, as I call them now, is like movies just kind of pause and they just give you a lecture about something randomly. I didn't really notice it until maybe late 2019, early 2020. But did you notice it before then? When did you think it started?
I think my first awareness of it was 2019 too. And it was with Captain Marvel. That was the first time that I saw, there's something different. It felt very different. And then it got worse from there. I think Captain Marvel felt like, it was interesting. I was going back because I wasn't a YouTuber then. So I was going back and watching all those interviews, and then I was watching some of the scenes, the Avengers scenes, and I thought, oh, this is such a waste, because she could have been such an incredible character. That when she arrives on Earth in the Endgame scene, and she destroys the ship. It was actually a really cool scene, but they could not build that proper what do you call it, goodwill with the audience. So when I was in that audience, nobody cheered for her, and there were so many cheers happening all the time. I mean, the audience was hyped for this movie. When anything related to Scarlet Witch, when she was going head to head with Thanos, I mean, there was just like electric excitement. People loved it. But when she showed up, they're like, who cares? And I think that's when I started to feel like there's something so different about, they feel so empowered despite the audience not responding properly. They feel so convinced that they're on the right side. And I started to feel like there's something weird going on. Is that the movie that was kind of like the red herring for you too?
Yeah, for sure. That was the first time, especially with the MCU, that I noticed like a really clear message that they put before telling a good story and making a good
Mm,
movie. And it was kind of the
yeah.
first time they started to not honor the fan base and start to,
Mhm.
I guess, think that they know what the fan base should think and that they know best for their mind and for their life. That was definitely the first time I noticed. And then for the back end of 2019, I didn't really notice anything like that coming from any films. And then
Mm,
2020, it really kicked off. And then I started seeing a lot more of channels like yours pop up, really highlighting these issues. And I was like, that's exactly why I stopped. Like, I stopped caring as much about Marvel and a lot about different movies,
yeah.
really. And a lot of channels like you really pinpointed that accurately. And so, from your opinion too, because we're seeing a lot of talk around female characters now. And so, from a female perspective, where do you think they're going wrong and how do you right the ship?
I think the underlying what we were talking about, that emotion, if you actually then take it up to like what's the overlining philosophy that they're aiming for, it's female empowerment is the disguise, but it's really female supremacy. And I have a massive issue with that. That's actually my biggest problem. It's in the same way that I have a problem with the concept of male supremacy, right? And there was this interview with are you familiar with Just Pearly Things?
No.
She's a huge conservative commentator, and she's a big advocate for men in divorce proceedings because men are often losing out on any access to their children. She's doing great work, but one of the things she said is like, "Oh, women shouldn't vote." And I was like, "Wait, are we going a little too far with how much we're criticizing women?" So I think like I really try to have that balanced view, even though sometimes it doesn't show up like that. So I got to work on that. But um, I this concept of female supremacy is then really personified in the character, and then the character is very much written to talk down to every man around her. And they have to create the way the structure of the story usually is turning out to be, is that they have to create this maximum vacuum that then only she can fill. So everyone around her is, like every male around her is a blundering fool who's, so disconnected from reality, and just so pathetic. Like there's no other word for it. They're
Sure.
really writing men as like these pathetic characters. I have a huge problem with that. I think this concept, this desire of pandering to me as a woman by creating these characters is actually deeply flawed. The type of woman you end up pandering in those situations are narcissists, women who want to actually exercise their tyranny over the men around them, right? They want to treat their men as pathetic. And then and I see that actually play out quite a lot, that women of certain type will choose partners that are particularly um, weak, terrible children, and like, and then they'll absolutely run roughshod over them. That means that this woman can have it any way she wants. That man has almost no say in her life, and he turns into this form of like servant, but that she despises because he's so useless. And the thing is that idea feels very attractive to women because we've been empowered enough that we want to be in control, and we're really good at it, turns out, because women are, you can see the stats, typically speaking, is that we're high enough in agreeableness and we're high enough in conscientiousness that certain high paid positions are perfect for us. Like lawyers, female lawyers crush it, right? Same with accounting, like women just crush it in those fields. But after a certain while, that that space of you just being the only competent one becomes very lonely, and it becomes terrible. And I've been trying to put this thought together in my head, which is that a man can't even understand how truly satisfying it is to a woman if she knows that there's a man around that she can count on. And that concept like we don't talk about that as feminists. We're not allowed to talk about needing men, but there is a need that women have. We need competent men, and I feel like that, right? I'm recently married, and I have been in those situations, in those relationships where the men are so incompetent and so pathetic. And then there are those instances that the men are so tyrannical that I don't feel in control at all. And then I have a relationship with now with a man who is so so confident in himself, but it gives me space to be whatever I need to be. So supportive, so kind, so considerate. And then there are like, I've been by myself for a long time, and I really didn't feel like I needed anybody. And then I started to feel the loneliness of it. And then he came along, and there's so many things that I can just say, you know what, he's got it. He's got it. That's deep satisfaction of knowing that I can count on him and he'll take care of it. And I feel genuinely safe in that. I think I think that's the biggest piece that modern media is missing about women, is that they actually want to create this weird pseudo reality where the female supremacy movement goes so far is that we make men redundant. We don't need men. And I think that's so flawed, because women are miserable when they're not around strong men. They're miserable. But it's the same with men. Men are miserable without women, you know. And I know I'm getting into the relationship thing a lot and deviating away from the movie thing, but like there was someone in my life said this, that men have the means, but women provide the meaning. And I said, that's so true. That's 100% true. That like men can accomplish anything, but women are the motivation in so many ways. And we don't talk about that. We just don't. So that's my whole reasoning, is that I want there, we are at this like such an impasse between masculine and feminine energy that it's turned into a war versus any sort of discussion, conversation. And I think it's actively hurting people, including women.
Definitely. I think that too. I've been thinking that a lot lately, for maybe the last month, just about how we no longer talk about like the balance between masculinity and femininity, and that's where the true beauty lies. Like in my opinion, in the best relationships you have in life, it's that amazing dance between masculinity and femininity. And now it's as if like masculinity is inherently bad, and
Mm.
feminine people and women in general don't need men. They don't need them at all. You're good on your own. And it's just sending a really bad message and causing a war, like you said. And so, do you think the way that you can correct it is by trying to portray more of those relationships on screen, less like soul film, like less about just the one character, the one woman, the one man, more about the balance between the two? Is that how we correct it?
Yes, and I think Joss Whedon did a really great job of this with everything that he created. You know, it's really like he's completely just he's like canceled, gone. You know, there's nothing. But you know, one of the shows that I always admired of his was Firefly, and that what you're talking about, right? There are women that embody masculine energy really well, and then there are men that embody feminine energy. And what he did was that he showed that array of possibilities, right? There were women on that ship. Are you familiar with Firefly?
No, I didn't watch it. I know what it is, but I haven't
Oh,
seen
oh, you should. You're
it.
gonna. It's on Hulu right now, so tonight if you don't have any plans. It's it's a great show. So and I won't give anything away, but there are great examples of different types of women, and then there are different types of men. There are men that are more protective, there are men that are more aggressive, there are men that are much softer. And then, because I think Joss has a great understanding of interplay along with the other writers on that show, he would show the interplay between the different characters. And I think this is the biggest piece that's missing from the way characters get written today, is the concept of balance. That if you are very masculine, that comes with positives and negatives. And if you are very feminine, that comes with positives and negatives. But that concept doesn't exist anymore. And this is true across the board, like with everything. There's a lot of black and white writing that if you don't believe this, then you're just wrong. Versus like, okay, let's even take something as, I mean, it's like quite a complex topic, but like, being pro environment, right? Like you can be pro environment and recognize that there are policies that might be suggested that are going to hurt people and make people poorer for it, right? But that's not how these writers are thinking. They're thinking like, no, if you're against the environment, if you're not for these policies, you are against the environment and you need to be cast into hell and or whatever, fate that they want to deliver. And that's the problem that old style writing, I mean, it sucks to call it old because it was so good, and it sucks that to recognize that it's gone out of fashion, but there used to be this recognition that anything comes with its challenges and positives, and that then and then that proves that you need the other side to balance out the positives or the negatives. You need challenge to figure out what the answer is, because an overly aggressive masculine perspective on something doesn't always work, and an overly sensitive and emotional perspective on something doesn't work. You need the balance, and you need the both sides to work together. But that's the thing, it's like it's this desire to cut people off, and that's the political landscape, right? You don't believe what I believe, you don't get to talk to me. I don't have to listen to you. You're triggering me. Like whatever other phrases. I was trying to think of one, but I can't think of one. But anyway, that there's no room for proper conversation. It's instead like my way or the highway. And then so that's why the characters get written with those easy brushstrokes. Oh, she's perfect in every way, and this and that. And so there's no room for challenge. There's no room for discussion.
A question I wanted to ask as well is it seems to be a lot of focus on identity now. Like a lot of films, a lot of things just in life is all about identity. What do you think are the positives and negative impact of that on film?
I can think of the negative, but the positive is a hard one. Okay. I would say there is a lot of positive impact of that. If the society is diverse, then characters should also be diverse. I find it very reprehensible when people look back on 40 years ago, media created 40 years ago, and say, wow, America was so racist, they didn't have diversity back then. Yeah, because America was a primarily white community. It has changed because of globalization, that all the Western societies have really shifted. But it's like you go to India, everything is about Indians. Like it's because they're primarily Indian society. You could point out than saying that there are small communities of other types of people living there. But it's like, yeah, who cares? Indians don't care about that. It's interesting that the West always gets picked on because it has so many positives, and how accepting the West is actually the most accepting of other minorities, and yet it gets picked on the most. I mean, you go to India, and as a white person, go and demand your rights there, and good luck with that. So, and that's the case anywhere. Go demand your rights in China as a Chinese person. Good luck with that. I mean, so it's endless. Anyway, I could. That's one of those things that really bugs me. I'm an Indian immigrant, and I've lived in America for a big chunk of my life, and I get actually very angry at how much America gets attacked, because I actually think it's a safe haven, and we've created this beautiful society here. We haven't. Actually, people who have come before us have done it, but we're doing our best to destroy it. And I agree. I lump the UK and Australia in the same boat as that, because they're all Western, they're part of that Western culture. So the good part is that a diverse society should have diverse identities represented. The bad part about it is that it is a tool. It is a tool to fuel your narcissism, is my perspective on it. If you, let's say, want to play around with your identity, or you feel unseen, which is actually a reality for most people, like growing up, most people feel unseen. I think that's just the human condition, is that until you figure out who you are, you don't know how to present yourself out in the world. And all of life is a negotiation of you with the world of how you're going to be perceived. Like many men go through this, that they feel like they're perceived as weak, they're rejected by any women that they reach out to, they really struggle with that. They don't feel seen, and they're trying to crystallize their identity as, let's say, a successful macho man, and they're trying to figure out how to do that. And what happens in those instances is, like, the man has to figure out and some things that he needs to change. Maybe he needs to hit the gym, maybe he needs to work on his career, stop drinking, stop doing all these things that are hurting him, and get, maybe dress better, and like put some work into his relationships with his friends, with his family. And slowly the people around him start to see him differently, and he earns his position in that society and gets recognized with the identity that he wants to be seen with. And he's rewarded for his effort. Identity now, it has become a no effort tantrum, right? I woke up today and I feel like X, Y, and Z, and you have to see me as X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, I'm going to tell everybody online, and they're going to come and mob you for that. And it's really is narcissism, because one of the tenets of narcissism is that you feel entitled to whatever you want without having to put any effort into it. You don't want to play the rules of the game. You don't want to play rules of society. You want to manipulate other people into playing with you. Otherwise, you will make them pay. And that's my issue with identity, is that if someone looks like a particular gender to me and I approach them and they say, oh, sorry, no, I'm actually this identity. Can you call me by that? Yes, of course, I would be happy to. But if I misgender someone and then that person is like actually genuinely angry with me and throws a tantrum, you're lying. You're gaslighting me at that point. I look at you. I'm taking visual cues. I'm looking at you, and you don't get to tell me what truth is in that moment. But if you ask me to accommodate you, I'm happy to do that. So I think that's my issue with this overwhelming, pressure on, you must respect identity at all costs. I think Hollywood is reinforcing that point through how it's representing it in movies.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it all stems from the writing. And I don't think that they even know the damage that they're actually causing. Because I know, like, in my life, I was lucky enough to live overseas for a lot of my early years because my parents
Oh,
were
nice.
journalists. So when I lived in, it was actually quite similar. When I lived in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and then also in Beijing, like, stuff that was reinforced to us through, because I went to like local schools there. My parents were like adamant on sending me to local schools to learn about different areas and learn about different cultures. And something that stuck with me from both countries was that when you wake up in the morning, the most important thing is not how you feel, it's what you have to do. And that was always the case. And I do think that that best serves me, and I feel happier for it. At the end of the
Mm,
day, when I wake up and I'm feeling tired, lazy, sluggish, but I do things that I didn't want to do in the moment, at the end of the day, I'm happy I did them, and I feel like I did want to do them. And then I'm, I guess, more motivated to do more the next day. Whereas I think now, just
yeah.
purely through the writing of the way they write films now about how, they should accept you for who you are. You're perfect. You don't have to change. You don't have to go through struggle and hardship. They should just accept you. I actually don't think they know the damage they're causing, because I think for a lot of the writers in Hollywood, fortunately for them, they're all college educated for the most part. Like, so many, I'm researching, like the writer of Doctor Strange stuff, they all go to college. And especially in America, that's really expensive. And so a lot of them come from privileged upbringings, and they don't know that most people come from a worse upbringing than them. They can't just wake
Mm,
up and go, everyone should accept me. It's like they have to struggle and work hard. And if you're sending them a message saying that they don't have to, you're only damaging their life and their future families. And so,
mm.
why do you think that it's because the privilege that writers come from that they're writing that way? Or, like, where do you think we're going wrong there?
Yeah, I think when when you have situations that are so difficult, you kind of cut out anything that feels extraneous and you just focus on what's necessary, right? And that what that sentiment you're saying, that it doesn't matter how you feel. What matters is what you can do. And that's, you know, certain types of parents raise their children with that sense of belief, right? But when you create, when things go so well in a society that, and you know, it's not talked about because of how much people complain all the time about things, but like we have it really great. If you happen to live in certain countries, you have it really great. I'm sure you feel the same way. And you know, like compared to even our ancestors 100 years ago, I mean, how lucky are we to, and look at us, we're talking across, you know, across the world in real time. Like that's amazing. You know, I think it's hard to remember sometimes just how awesome it is. And both of us here sitting, we're not sitting at boring desk jobs, even though I'm at my desk and you're probably at your desk, but you know, we have exciting jobs that are based on our passions. When could people 80 years ago go and pursue their passions, you know? So I think when you have, when you get lucky enough and can't contextualize that with gratitude, like attach, you know, a sufficient amount of gratitude to that, then you are likely to try to create your own, manufacture your own victimhood. And I think that's the path of being overprivileged, is trying to repeatedly prove how underprivileged you really are. And I think it's because it's this desire to give justification for a feeling of emptiness. And I think that's what's happening with the writers, is that they feel they have this life and they feel empty and they don't know what to do. And I think in the past, people would fill that emptiness with God, and they would feel that with a feeling of God's presence. And while I'm not terribly religious myself, I see a lot of value in living as if there is God. Like even if you don't believe in God, live as if God exists, because it gives you this feeling of what's the best way to put it? I guess it gives you this feeling like you can be better and things can get better. And it gives like a form of orientation that you can try to work towards this ideal. But I think because we've killed God in our society really effectively, people don't know where to direct their frustration. And we've also done such a good job of breaking down every possible like recommendation that society had. Like society said, like, hey, get a job, get married, like find a good woman or find a good man and have some kids and you'll live a good life, is like what society truly believed, right? And there's a reason for that. It's actually because but now you say that and you're like, whoa, what if I don't want to get married? You know, what if I want to be in a relationship with 4 people? What if I don't want to have kids? I just want to have dogs. And it's like fine, you can do that, go for it. But we've been so open to those thoughts that people, like on an individual level, don't know what to do with their lives, because anything's possible. There's no judgment from society, which again, I'm not suggesting that we throw rocks at unmarried people, but I think some level of judgment helps guide people to figuring out what's going to keep them fulfilled in life, because it's an 80-year sprint. People in the past just needed to worry about like 40 years and they were done. But like we have to ride this out for 80 years. Like you got to find meaning, because happiness comes and goes. Things are good, things are really bad. Health issues are going to like haunt you for big chunks. If it's not your health, it's going to be someone's health that you know. They're going to be financial problems. How do you manage the good times and the suffering, and how do you create a life that's worth living? And I think that's where people feel really lost in an overly blessed society with no concept of orientation. And
Yeah.
I think that's the thing with the writers.
Yeah, you nailed it there. Just like that purpose and having that just in a, yeah, well, in a purpose that comes from religion, or if you can find it somewhere else, that's great, but you have to have that, especially in storytelling. And like, people
Yeah.
always throw stones at certain cultures in certain countries, saying like, oh, they're really oppressed. Say like, when I lived in Dubai, people would say to me here, oh, people are so oppressed there. And I'm like, well, yes, there is more oppression there than there is here, but I don't think that the reason, for the most part, that there's a lower divorce rate and that there's less people, I guess, changing their gender and stuff, comes from them completely being oppressed. Like, you're just putting that on them. A lot of it is they have lower divorce rate because they have purpose,
Mm,
for the most part. Like, a lot of them are quite happy. And
mm,
I went to like the local school where they were both like extremely wealthy kids and really poor kids. And they would be friends, and their parents would be much more happy than middle
mm.
class people here in Australia
Yeah.
or in America.
Yeah.
And that purpose
Yeah.
is a huge thing. And so I think as well with actors, and you kind of touched on it in your latest video, the whole activism thing that actors are doing now, I do think that comes from a place of lack of purpose as well. And the whole reason
Mm,
that they're really pushing messages is because they feel, I guess, unworthy of maybe the following and the money that they have. And I feel like for a lot of actors as well, they feel like, oh, my job isn't contributing as much to society as other jobs, but I'm being paid 200 times what others are being paid. And so I do think a lot of that comes from their own self consciousness. And
mhm.
so, yeah, I thought that was a really good point that you touched on there. Do you think that's the case with a lot of actors? Is they just don't have that purpose and that drive?
Yes, and it's interesting because they might I agree that they do perceive that, oh, am I really adding value, but I'm being paid so much, so then they have this massive discrepancy. But the reason they get paid so much is because, forget the actor, it's the character. The character does what, in this amazing medium that can travel globally, makes people feel, and it'll make them feel for a lifetime, right? Like, we can sit and watch movies from the 1930s, and it makes us feel, and it becomes something that lives forever. It's immortal. So that person putting in the effort to act and create that kind of art should be rewarded for eliciting that kind of human response, right? And and I think then they don't see that. They don't see the value of actually their own characters. And they get too caught up that the celebrity is about me. That if I'm showing up somewhere, people are excited to see me. No, they're here to see the character or the characters you have played. People don't care about Chris Evans. They care about Captain America. And the reason people loved him is because that character is incredible. Same with Robert Downey Jr., except he happens to be just like Tony Stark, which is amazing. And I think people forget that, and start then making it so much about themselves. Like, well, I'm this, and like then they buy into that. And I think that, and then there starts to be this discrepancy where internally they feel empty, and then externally they're projecting this really bigger than life image of, who am I beyond this character, because I'm so much more significant than this lowly character. And then they start putting that character down. Maybe they say things about it, and it's like starts to then break the illusion. And often that, like, that's one of the reasons why I hate actually going and looking into, if I really like a movie, if I really like a character, I'll often not look up the person, because I'll go on their Instagram and immediately they're talking about some woke nonsense, and I'm just like, it's like, you don't even know your character. You don't even know all the nuance you channeled in that movie or in that show. You don't even understand it, right? And I think that's the problem, is that they're just, yeah, I don't think they get it.
Yeah, for sure. My favorite actors personally are the ones who remove themselves from that celebrity lifestyle, from being in front of
Mm,
cameras all the time, like Daniel Day-Lewis, Christian
mm,
Bale, Meryl Streep.
yes.
They avoid all that sort of noise and stuff. So when you watch them in a movie, despite the fact that they're ridiculously famous, you forget that their name is Christian Bale, or you forget, for the most part, it's hard to, but you forget it's Meryl Streep, and you start watching the character on screen. And that's so important. I definitely feel like so many actors now, probably just due to social media, feel that
Yeah.
they have to talk about political stuff and they have to give their opinion, like you showed in your recent video.
Yeah.
Um, And to change gears here a little bit, there's a lot of talk, especially with Peter Pan recently coming out, about recasting for different races and race recasting and stuff. And there's a lot of talk about that on YouTube. And do you ever feel like sometimes some people talking about that with their channels are in a way masking a sort of bigotry? Because sometimes when I look at it, I'm like, okay, there's no problem with redoing a film or changing the race of a character when the race was never in the original source material. They never talk about the race, so it's okay. Like there's no problem with that really. So do you think sometimes the big talks around being like, oh my god, they changed this character who was white to a black character is sometimes bigoted as well?
I think it can be. And I do notice that it's a hard line to walk without actually crossing over into a place of intolerance. And like I'm with you where I see no problem with representing different races and doing some race swapping. But I do wonder when I do see some race swapping going on, I do wonder if it's going to come with a whole ton of lecturing. That's what I always like. Now, just having kind of experienced it on a vast scale, I say, is this going to be just about is it just going to be race swapping, or is it going to be being told about how one race is superior to another, or like one gender is superior to the other, like something like that, right? Or just changing what the character represents altogether. I think that's where people get really angry, is like they love a particular character, but I don't think that a lot of people love a particular character because of their skin color. But I do think that there are a lot of other people that are trepidatious in the same way, that if you're gonna race swap, you're gonna start telling me, you're gonna start turning this into propaganda of sorts. But there are instances, I think, that people are just uncomfortable with it. I haven't really come across that too much. But I do think that sometimes when people are criticizing it, they don't draw that line. Like, where do you have a problem with this in particular versus just this general ideology of woke? I don't think people are very clear about that from time to time.
Yeah, for sure. And I
Yeah.
definitely I try to be as clear as possible, but even sometimes I'll make a video and I've already finished recording it. I'm like, oh, I should have probably added that, but it's too late now, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I understand where that can come from.
Yeah.
But yeah, a huge problem for me though, like that I noticed with Peter Pan, I recently made a video on it, was that they changed Tinkerbell, so they had a black Tinkerbell, and I didn't have a problem with that. But when they use her to market basically the whole movie, and they have her doing all
Mm.
these huge press interviews, and then I watch the film, and she's in it no longer than 80 seconds total. Like they have like three cutaway scenes to her, and that's about it. It's like they're just using race swapping and this surface level diversity to market films and just make money. Whereas I think a better thing to do would be not going back and doing a fifth movie about a Scottish story, but find source material from another country, another culture, and tell those stories. Because at the moment, Disney and a lot of companies are just redoing old films that come from Scotland, England, America, these white Western countries. Why don't you go and take source material from an African country or India or wherever and then
Mm-hmm.
tell those stories? Because wouldn't that be what they're actually fighting for? Or is it just for money?
Yeah, it's the why of it, right? Because the thing is, like, it is okay. Yes, partially, I do think it's making money, but you could make money doing really anything like marginally good. You have the Disney logo on it, you're gonna make money. But why? Why is it that they have to take Western stories and mangle them, right?
Yeah,
Because this is not just about diversity. This is about revenge.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
This is about trying to put Western nations in their place. And there's this book, by the way, that I read recently. It's by Douglas Murray. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called War on the West. I think it helped me understand what exactly is the emotion behind all of this. But it's about taking the best things that the West has to offer, like diversity, and turning it against it and saying, no, you're like the best thing about the West, we could all acknowledge. When I was here, I landed here in 2000, and over the next couple of years, I started to like just see how diverse this country was. That no one I met was born here, no one, or if they were, it was like their parents weren't born here. Like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that no one was from here, but everybody was openly accepted and it was totally fine. That's like the best thing about the West. What's the worst accusation you could make against a country that is like raised on the concept of individualism and acceptance? You call it racist as hell. And that's what it is. So take their work. Let's take Lord of the Rings, created by a British author who wrote it specifically because he felt like the British did not have a lore. Why did the British not have a lore? Is because they were overtaken many times by conquerors and lost all of their history. It was completely lost. So why did he write it? Because he wanted his people to have a history, to look at a language that we could say, oh, this is the language we come from. He just wanted to give that. No, let's take it over. No, everybody's black, everybody's this. Why should the West get to preserve their culture? Right. So that's the whole reason. That because you were right. We could go to other countries. There are all these other stories that could be told right now. But they don't want to do that. They don't want to do anything original. Yeah.
What's funny too is like the angry reaction to Western culture is coming from Western people. So why? Like, why are they? What do you think sparked this huge reaction to really start just saying everything about the West is bad and all the things we've done up until 2020 was really bad and racist and sexist? Like, where did that reaction start and come from?
I think it came from a lot of indoctrination from professors and this desire to create an epidemic of self-loathing that, you know, because there's this like massive self-flagellation happening all the time by white people. And, you know, oh, check your privilege, I should check my privilege and this and that. Whereas, you know, a lot of, if you actually meet immigrants and people, you know, like minorities, they don't feel like that. They don't agree with that. In fact, I come across so many TikTok accounts of minorities like talking positively about the West. So I think it is that what we were talking about earlier, right? That, you know, the Westerners were born here. They were given this gift, but they didn't receive it like a gift. They received it as some form of curse, as if something they should be resentful of. And it's because a lot of the Western history has been rewritten in as part of this indoctrination, and Western society has been rebranded as this like rapacious, you know, imperial society. And everything has been rewritten like that. So if you know, the British, which happened, like the British were very interested in preserving artifacts of the past and went to different nations and asked for permission to do excavations and bring these things back. And instead of these things rotting away in war-torn countries, they brought them and preserved them in British museums. That's considered them stealing. When if you go to the British Museum and you see the history behind everything, is that they asked the local government, can we take it? Can we take this? Can we pay for it? Can we like everything was done with proper paperwork? Why? Because they wanted to preserve it, because otherwise it was literally just going completely forgotten. So everything, but that endeavor and excitement for preserving the past of other people's nations has been rebranded as imperial. You just took that. You stole that. And I'm not saying that the West is never committed any crimes. They've done their stuff, but so have other countries. But so I think this self-loathing has been this like that the perspective has been that every other country is positive, no matter what their perspectives on acceptance and religion, or like you know, if another country wants to preserve its religion, that's okay. If they want to preserve their culture, that's okay. But if the West wants to do it, no, absolutely not. So it's this, you know, the indoctrination has worked really well. That's actually what's really sad about it, is that it was happening in the background for 30, 40 years by all these college professors that had this intense resentment of America. And so they activated that in a lot of students. And I was part of that. Like a lot of my college professors were telling me how much America sucked, but I just refused to accept it, because for me, I didn't receive America as a gift. my family and I had to earn our place here. We had to really work to be here, and I saw how hard my father and my mother worked to be here. So to me, it was not just something handed. So I had to appreciate it. And I don't think that people born here really think like that.
Yeah, definitely. Like I was just in New York over Christmas time, and every time I hopped in an Uber and I had someone who wasn't from America, and I would talk to them about America and about the country, and they just love it. Like they're so thankful, and they're not living in the greatest areas in the greatest place, and they don't have a lot of money, but they're just so thankful for America. And so
Yeah.
for all these other people to be grateful for a country, and then its own people just hate it. It's sad because
Yeah.
all the best films that came out of America were because they loved America and that patriotism was strong, and it definitely
Mm,
did help.
yeah.
And so to change it to a more positive note here, what
Yeah.
films are you most excited for this year?
So many. I'm very excited for Oppenheimer. So I'm a Christopher Nolan girl through and through. Though Tenet was, I
Yeah.
did not understand Tenet. I was sitting in the theater, I was looking at my husband like, I have no idea what's going on. Who's fighting who? I had no clue. It was great. I should try to watch it again. But I'm very excited about Oppenheimer. I'm also very excited about Dune. I think that's going to be amazing. Timothy, your video on Timothy Chalamet is so good because he's such a great actor. But that first Dune movie, it was so good. The music, everything. And then weirdly, I'm excited for Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm excited to watch that. I think that will be a good movie. I think.
Yeah, that's the one
Um,
Marvel movie I'm
yeah,
excited for.
yeah, right. I think that will
James
be good.
Gunn.
At least, yeah, he and Chris Pratt are doing a good job of it. So, and then weirdly, I'm excited for Barbie because like nothing, there was an interview with Margot Robbie. She said, like, whatever you think this movie is going to be about, you're going to be surprised. So I'm like, that sounds intriguing enough to me. I would want to check that out.
Yeah, Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, like I love them so much. Like
Really?
I think their writing, yeah, really good. And so yeah, I'm excited for Barbie. And you kind of get a hint of it in the trailer, like the sly comments that they make. It's like, oh, okay, this is gonna be a bit darker than what
Oh,
everyone's
interesting.
expecting. Yeah.
Okay. Even more excited now.
Yeah. And so what's next for you and your channel?
I'm sure you go through this. I'm like constantly, I feel like every time it's like a rebirth. I don't know if you feel like that.
Okay,
You're
every
like, where?
Monday.
Yeah, yeah, every Monday. I'm like,
What
what
direction is my
now?
channel going in? Like,
Yeah, yeah. And today is a really momentous day. I think while we've been talking, I might have crossed 250,000 subscribers. So I'm
oh
very
wow.
excited about that. So, but it's like, again, it's like when you experience a milestone, you're like, where are we going? What's the bigger vision? So it's changed a lot since I first started it. I think what I want to start heading to more and more is talk about bigger questions around society, kind of things we've touched on is like, what does it really mean to be a toxic male? What does it really mean to be a positive male? I think that's a topic that I really want to explore. I want to talk about obsession over identity. I want to talk about things like that. So I think I've done a lot of stuff around movies and stuff, and I will continue to do that. Actors and movies. As well as real life people. I've done a lot of analysis on the royals. I think what might be next is some more meta questions, which, once the audience grows, you get a lot of freedom. So I don't know if you feel this way, but like in my early days, I felt so landlocked because, there's certain people here, they're here for one topic, right? One subject. And I think niching down early days is really important, but then you have to like softly start to test waters and like start to break the niche. And I think now I feel lucky that I can start to break into even bigger topics, because if I had tried to do that, with far fewer subscribers, people have just bailed on me. So it does feel better and better, and like how much freer I feel and what I can explore.
Yeah,
So I'm
that's
excited for that.
definitely the goal because I feel the same way. Because for me, I feel like there's a lot of movie channels where people are just like complete movie fans, and that's all they think
Yeah,
about. That's all they care about. Whereas like
yeah,
hugely interested in film, but storytelling as a whole because of what it represents and what it can symbolize. And I'm interested in a lot of different things just growing up with two journalist parents. And so
Yeah.
I do want to make videos about different stuff. But at the moment, it's too difficult because I started doing that too early. Like I was just making videos that I cared about. And then I realized, well, my channel's not growing at the rate I want because I'm just not sticking to one thing. So
Mm.
about maybe 2 months ago, I decided to just, okay, stick to one path. And then hopefully as it grows, start to dip into other things. So what's your advice on having that through line of, like, for you, it's basically talking about movies and the royals, and like narcissism is a big thing. So what's
Mhm.
your advice to keeping your subscribers and fans happy while also giving them a little bit of something else and making them go, oh, I can listen to them talk about this as well? How do you go about
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think what, the strategy you're suggesting is that of kind of sticking to one track. Um, but I would say balance it with a risk and go sideways on the risk. So go as far out from what you're generally talking about and just test the waters. And what you'll see is you will be really disappointed for the first long time, because
that?
it'll launch and then it'll be like 10 out of 10 in your growth, in your view growth, because the algorithm is starting to learn about you, right? It's like it the more content you create, the more it gets to know who you are. And but in the beginning stages, when you're like on the smaller side, it doesn't get to test your content out as much with different types of people. But the more the audience grows, then the algorithm knows, I know where to put this. But when you take massive risks, it can start to attract like a totally different type of audience. And you don't know if your subscribers might love it, they might hate it, they might love it. And there were many of these instances where I was taking risks and people were dropping off, and it was really frustrating because you feel every person leaving, right? And one day I was just so depressed, and my husband's like, what happened, and I said, well, I lost subscribers because I posted this video and I felt like it was such a risk, and I get it, but I didn't think that they would leave. And he's like, how many left? And I was like, 25. And he's like, it's okay. But I'm like, but it hurts, because you're hoping that this actually gives you, let's say, like 500. So
Yeah.
it's really that you feel like you've lost 525. It feels painful. But if you can accept that you're going to have that happen many times, you can take a good enough risk that starts to tell you where you should be going. Because the question is, where are you going to create your best work? And you don't get to discover that unless you take massive risks with random stuff, right? It's like and that was kind of my experience of it, right? I was making I started off with The Office. Then I was making content about this reality show that I was obsessed with at the time. Then I started making content about the royals, and that was just accidental. And then a video about Meghan Markle really took off. And then I was like, okay, but this is not what I want to do. And I took like a massive risk with a woke feminism video. And I kid you not, for the first 100 days, it got 300 views. That was it.
Oh, that's your like 5 million viewed video.
Yeah. Yeah. It did
Jeez.
not it did not blow up until like 100 days 100 days after its launch.
Jeez.
And so I thought it was a complete dud. I thought it was a complete failure. And then around late March, it just I published it in January, late March, it just blew up and it took off. And that month, I got 50,000 subscribers.
That's
Yeah,
nuts
and
as
I
well.
but for those 100 days, I was like, I was so disappointed because I made this attempt. But then I kept trying it. I kept trying. I was making all these other videos, all these, like, the thing is, it is such a risk, and you have to constantly manage your negative emotion around it, because it's something like, you care about this, I care about this. I don't want to go back to a regular job. And every time I have a failure, people around me like, maybe you want to go back to your old life, and you were getting paid money there. I'm like, yeah, but I love this. So it's I think the bigger the risk, the better the return from either the financial aspect or you feeling like I know where I need to go.
Yeah.
Right. And I think if you can answer either of those questions, hopefully simultaneously, then the risk is worth it. And just go where your attention is really calling for you.
And so for you and your channel, is there an end goal in mind, or is it right now just make the videos you care about and just keep growing the channel? Is the channel the sole focus, or are there other avenues you want to get into?
Yeah, the channel is the sole focus. Before I used to make a lot of goals and metrics that I wanted to hit, less action oriented, more results oriented, and I found that to be just such folly because you can't control it. So now I just control what I just set goals for what I can control. So how many videos I make. So the requirement I have for myself is no distractions. I have to create 2 videos a month. They have to be good. They have to be things I'm proud of. And aside from that, just let's see where it goes. Yeah.